Mystical spiritual experience number 2. I remember being, let's see, 4.5 years old. And my mother was part of a Catholic women's group. And they had a whole bunch of women at the house that they were talking about this book that had been written by a Catholic woman that was super controversial in the church about her going to Ireland and her having a past life experience that was like in 3D. And the whole book is about how that experience altered her understanding of spirituality and religion, and it was something very powerful for her, and it was considered very controversial in the Catholic Church in the 1960s, because it would have been 1964. I came into this group of women aggressively arguing certain points about reincarnation, the possibility or not possibility, and the position of the Catholic Church related to all of this, and whether it was blasphemy, whether it wasn't blasphemy. And I could feel myself getting heated, breathing. And again, what these videos are about, these mystical experiences, are about connecting breath and mystical experiences. And the more I breathed, I kept breathing, because there was so much energy in the room. And at the same time, I had an opinion, and there was like this knowingness inside of me that was so strong. So at 4.5 years old, I finally blurted out. I said, well, of course you've had past life experiences. Can't you remember yours? At which point they stopped and stared at me in total shock. And my mother, praising my mother, she said, well, do you remember yours? And I said, well, of course I remember mine. And I proceeded to rattle them all off. Now, of course, I wish somebody had written them all down, because now I don't remember what they are. But I knew where I was. I knew my name. I knew when I was born. I knew what my parents' names were. I knew if I got married. I knew how I died. I knew all sorts of weird things. And I just started rattling all of this off. And it just felt like this force inside of me that was ancient and wiser than my human physical form, that had walked through time, and in that moment was connected to all the time periods simultaneously, and understood that I was in this body having an experience, but I was also simultaneously in nonlinear time. I had had these other experiences, and I was somehow in that moment totally connected to them. And it was a powerful feeling. I felt like I was in the center of a vortex, but that vortex was like a tornado, and it was going up. I think it's interesting, that experience, because in the Mayan astrology, I'm a polarized white storm. So the gurus and the teachers used to say, you're like a baby white tornado. You kind of you spin energetically, and you pull things up, and you see the duality, you see both sides of everything. In that moment, I felt connected to everything. I felt that we are a being of light. And if we are a being of light, we are a being of light that is hundreds of thousands of light years long. And if we are this being of light, hundreds of thousands of light years long, we could send tentacles down into different time periods and be like a little droplet that separates from the larger flow and have an individual experience. But just like a drop of water that is always seeking the bigger flow, that there's this instinct we have that we know that there's a bigger flow that is us, that is a part of us, that is always reaching up, which I believe is what this spiritual experience is about. I feel like we're trying to get out of this this narrow, rigid structure that is limiting our perception, that there is something that is much bigger, that is much more objective and has a lot of overview and doesn't judge anything and doesn't judge anyone and is just love. And that there are certain spiritual and mystical experiences that unlock that door that separates, gives us this feeling of separation, and we all of a sudden merge into that larger flow for a moment. And in that moment, we see the overview. In that moment, we see the bigger picture. We see that we are all connected and we are all one. And I know that so many times with spiritual people, like spiritual people kind of use a lot of platitudes. And if you aren't in that alignment of divine love, it definitely sounds like a platitude, but it often isn't a platitude if you are connected into that higher flow, that you can start to see and become one with everything, and that you aren't separate from anything that is here in that moment. In that moment with those ladies, I felt like I was the little tiny toenail of an angel that was trying to ground truth, to break apart this delusion that they had, that was not about oneness, that I felt like I needed to say, you are more than you think you are. You are more than this experience. And of course you've had other lifetimes. And what God in his right mind would give you one chance and not give you other chances to correct things that you've been learning, or mistakes that you have made, which I still don't believe are mistakes. I think they're all learning experiences. But of course, if you wanted to give it another go, why not have another go? And of course, why would you do one thing and then look at other things and go, oh my God, I wish in another lifetime I could save children and be a surgeon, and then not come back and then not say, hey, yeah, go be a surgeon. God would say, go be a surgeon. So that is another spiritual experience. And when I was doing it, I was just breathing really intensely, and I had tears in my eyes, and my breath was really big, and I was standing there with my arms out like, of course you've had past lives. What is wrong with you people? And it was in that moment that I realized that adults didn't have all the answers. They actually didn't have the answers. They had actually lost connection to the divine. And that is why in the Bible it says, and the children shall lead. It's the innocent that lead. It's the love that leads. That's who we really are inside, is we are all these beautiful beings of light and innocence. And when you don't see other people as that light and innocence, you cause suffering.